This is a 2006 Chevrolet Silverado 1500 four-wheel drive. It's got a 5.3 Vortec, and it's going to have a radiator replaced. It's kind of hard to see, but the tank is leaking at the end of the core. We're going to have to remove this. Looks like it won't be too hard to get out. Just lay the fans back and pull this cover plate off. Now that we've got just the filler cover off, the filler panel off, we can go about getting this 10-foot long radiator hose off. We got some little pliers here. They're Astro 9409A. They're made for getting these weird GM clamps. You just slip it over top of the clamp. I should be able to squeeze it if I can. Hold on just a second. Can't do it with one hand. I finally got it to move. It takes a lot of force to squeeze these things. They don't have enough leverage on them. They work though. Probably could have done the same thing with a pair of channel locks. But sometimes you can't get channel locks on these hoses when they're way down underneath the motor. So these things come in handy in hard to reach places. But up here on top where you can reach it easy, they're just awkward. Okay, we've got the radiator fans separated from the radiator, and there's two bolts in the top. You take those two bolts out, then you have to lift the fans up. There's two little saddles right there. There's one on each side and made on the radiator that the double fans actually sit on, so you have to lift them up and kind of lay it back. And then we gotta get the transmission cooler lines. I've already got the main hose loose, and that's the burp line. That line right there is a bleeder that goes to the top of the block on these LS motors, and it vents air and circulates air and water, I guess, back to the radiator. But it's real low on the radiator. I don't know how that thing possibly worked, but that's what it's there for. It's to help water bypass. It's a bypass in that LS. Now we gotta get that other little transmission line off as soon as this coolant quits bleeding out, and then we'll be able to pull that shroud back a little further once we get these coolant lines off, or transmission cooler lines off. We've got the transmission cooling lines off. There's one on top, one on the bottom, right above the bottom radiator hose. It has these fancy little horseshoe clips on it that holds it right into the radiator here in these grooves. They're kind of a pain to get out. We've got all the hoses off and the fans laid back. We should be able to slide this thing out. The radiator is out. It cleared everything nicely. We didn't have to take anything else off. It's been pissing down this side for a while. It's corroded. The problem with these aluminium radiators is if you put regular tap water in them and you put the minerals in that comes in with the tap water, and you put the wrong kind of antifreeze that has salts in it, this big aluminum radiator becomes an anode, and it'll start through electrolysis. It'll start dissolving. It'll start taking the aluminum from here and depositing it inside the engine. It'll also start eating your water pump and your aluminum heads. If you got aluminum block, it will affect. Well, it won't affect it too much. I think the blocks are sleeved, but aluminum intake. This is plastic. You start having all kinds of problems. Even when the engine's not running, through electrolysis, it can still give up its aluminum if it's not grounded correctly, or if it uses. Well, every time you change your antifreeze, always use distilled water, because distilled water doesn't have any minerals in it, and it's less likely to boil over. It mixes better with the antifreeze. That's recommended, and you don't want to use anything else. Let's try to slide this back in. I'll be right back. Something we nearly missed when we went to stab these in. These little studs are supposed to have isolators on them, bushings. We took these little rings off and clipped them on. They're supposed to be attached to this, I think. And then these slides on over top of that. These are what isolates it from the frame. Make sure you remember those when you change it out. Now we're going to try to put it in. We also got isolators that you have to take off the other radiator that don't come with the new one. Of course, we forgot those too, so we're putting those on. We didn't really forget them, they didn't look right. We'll have those in here in just a minute. The fans back to the radiator, and they have to be slid into those little saddles. They lift up slightly and then drop down into those saddles, and then you put your two top box in. Now we got everything buttoned up, we're going to add the coolant. We've got concentrate, Death Cool equivalent from O'Reilly's, and then we've got 4 gallons of distilled water. And always use distilled water when you're working on your radiator. Because if you don't, you get the corrosion that happened to this one. You just dissolve your radiator basically when you use tap water. People don't believe that, but it's absolutely the truth. It wasn't as bad with copper, but it's really bad with these aluminium radiators. So he's going to pour a gallon of pure concentrate in, and then he's going to chase it with a bottle of a gallon of distilled. And then we'll keep adding until we top it off. The way you bleed this truck, you don't have an air bleed or anything. We don't have to hook the vacuum system up to it. All you have to do to this truck is get it topped off with fluid, start it up and let it run, and where it's got that built-in air bleed that returns back to the radiator, it'll bleed itself very quickly. He's going to go with a gallon of distilled, and it shouldn't take too much after that. The rest, he's going to mix the rest of his up and make 50-50, that way he can top it off with mixed. But it's going to, the gallon of each that he mixed right then will be just fine. We'll come back in a minute when it's time to burp. Well, first of all, I was talking about these pliers earlier that's for taking the clamps. These are Astro 9409A. Don't buy these, they're crap. They're junk. If I thought they was worth a dime, I'd recommend it, but they're not. They don't have enough leverage, and they're not designed. They bend. Every time you start bending a real powerful clamp, they just bend. So step up and get a better brand. If you're going to get them with longer handles. These things don't work at all. They're junk.
Here, what for you?
We wound up using these super long, what are these, Macs?
Mac, baby.
Super long Mac, curved. That's why we got the bottom radiator hose off. It was up on the bottom, so we had to use these. That's about all you can use, is something with a lot of leverage. Next thing we're going to use is this spill-free funnel, and this is for burping your radiator. These comes from Napa, where we got this one at. I guess several people make them. But we're going to set this up and show you how it works on the burp. This all set up. It comes with all kinds of adapters, so you can adapt it to a radiator. Well, somebody's shooting a gun. Adapt it to a radiator, or you can adapt it to a puke tank, and that's why this one's set up. It's also got a pin you can pull. You can pull it up and drop it in at a time, where you can burp it a little bit at a time. And that's going to pour just a small amount in there. And we're going to let it drain down into the tank. We're going to keep this tank full and let it keep burping. This kind of keeps it from splattering all over you and spilling everywhere. Probably just have to keep pouring it in until you fill this tank up.
It also raises the height level up. It makes it a higher point.
Yeah. The highest point is where your air, you want your air to come out. That way gravity helps you get the burp the air out of the engine. That's a good point, I hadn't thought about that. So we got this tank just about full. The problem with the tank is your fill is on the very top. I guess it has a siphon down in it. Matt's over here squeezing the hoses, and that pushes all the excess air out of the engine and the radiator. We're going to get this all the way full, then we'll start it up in a minute. We'll come back. I'm going to start this engine up and let it run a minute. What happened? It's already pushing the air out of it. These are pretty handy. All it does is just raises your antifreeze above the level of the motor so it can try to force all the air out. There goes another big bubble. Starting to take it down now. Keeping that distilled water and antifreeze in it. I don't think this modern antifreeze has as many mineral salts in it, and definitely distilled water doesn't have any, so it kind of cuts down on the corrosion on your engine. And you need that. You with aluminum motors that have different kinds of metals, when it's got dissimilar metals, you have all that reaction, and of course you don't want your radiator to become an anode either. So we'll give this a few minutes to run and see how much water it takes in. We'll be back. This engine's been idling about 10 minutes. We've run the heat. That way they can circle the water through the heater core. The fans have cycled through one cycle and they've shut back off. We're down around, they're back on now, so it must be hovering between 195 and 200 degrees. We're not getting any more bubbles. He said his temperature's not spiking, so I think with all that done, we've probably got all the air out of it. You don't have to have, because of the design of this truck, you don't have to have this fancy funnel, because the reservoir is above the radiator hoses anyway. It's the highest point on the engine. But we like having it that way we can make sure that we get the right amount of antifreeze in there. Kind of keeps the antifreeze from splashing all over you when it bubbles. He's going to drive this a little bit. We're going to call this done. We're going to get this tank and everything back to the level it needs to be and get all this antifreeze back out of here. But thanks for riding along with us. It's an easy radiator install. Check back with us later. We have some more cool stuff. If you don't care, go down and hit the like button and subscribe if you like this video. If you don't like the video, tell us what you think and what you'd like to see us do. We got all kinds of ideas, but we're just trying to get started in creating. So leave a comment. Tell us what you think of our content. And please subscribe. We need all the subscribers we can get. We're just getting started, and we don't have just a handful of subscribers right now. But thanks for watching. Thanks for riding along. Everybody stay clean.